On Real Estate for Real Life podcasts, we sit down with standout business leaders to unpack what's actually working.
How they scale, lead teams, win clients, and build businesses that last. We're your hosts. I'm Courtney Gauchman.
And I'm Ryan Wilson. Thanks for tuning in. We're here today with Jen and Meg, co-founders of Scully and O'Leary, and after careers in government and employment law, they started their own firm.
Now they help employers and employees navigate hiring, workplace issues, leave planning, and benefits.
Hi, guys.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, we're pumped to have you guys.
Excited to be
for
here.
many years and excited to sit down and chat with you about everything.
Definitely.
So guys, you had super successful careers. Why did you decide to start your own firm?
You know, that's a good question, Ryan.
Can't wait to hear the answer.
Not something that we had planned for, that's for sure. But in situations where you have like a health issue, you often don't see that coming. And so I navigated an unexpected injury in childbirth about 5 years ago. And Meg had been struggling with a diagnosis of endometriosis that was delayed, and she was having a hard time getting the services that she needed. And we both found ourselves kind of in this place where we, as advocates and people who had been trained to kind of find a solution, look at the big picture, frame it up, make decisions, and kind of solve the problem, we were really stuck in figuring out how to get the care that we needed. And as our treatment started to roll around the same time we were getting well, we recognized that there was a real gap in the employment and workplace space with both business owners and individuals in dealing with employment leave and benefits and advocacy in the medical setting. So that's kind of what prompted us to realize the service was needed. And then Meg and I both looked at each other and said, like, should we do it together? And that felt like a scary but also exciting choice to make. And we decided to just kind of jump in, even though there were so many reasons not to. And I don't know if Meg wants to add to that. But.
No, we always, we've been friends since childhood. And even when we both became lawyers, there was never a plan to start a law firm or go out on our own together or even individually, I don't think.
No.
And when we started walking down this road, we were kind of like, should we? I can think of a million reasons not to do this, but we kind of just kept walking down the road, and now here we are, and it feels like the most obvious thing, I think.
Yeah. And when it's really purposeful work, I know you all at Wilson Group feel that way, when you feel really connected to the work that you're doing. Some of the obstacles just feel like you can tackle them because the day-to-day work that you're doing really feels connected to you and your soul. So that's how we feel.
That's amazing. Awesome. Yeah. How do you guys balance work and the personal friendship that you have?
It's a great question. Yeah. And I don't know if I have a direct answer, except that I think, our friendship is so strong and the foundation of decades of time together and childhood. And, when you know someone from their youth and you grow up together and go through all these different experiences, it makes it really easy to recognize where they're coming from, the ways that, you might be driving them crazy, or, the ways that you maybe aren't aligned in certain approaches. And we just kind of sort through it as things come up.
Yeah, it's funny. I was listening to something recently about like a marriage, right? And how you become different versions of yourself with that person, and you hope that you remain compatible with one another as you grow into these new versions of yourself. I think professionally you do that as well. And so Meg and I are finding our groove and like learning these professional versions of ourselves and bridging the gap and where we maybe need to find more compatibility together so that we can like move forward with our mission for our firm. So it definitely is like a work marriage, and we try to carve out time when we know that there's personal things going on to actually be there in the friendship as well. Similar to like date nights for a marriage, right? Like we try to do that a little bit because I think that like that's the most important piece here. Like we think that that is what is unique about like our shared goals and purpose and what we're building. And it's also like our starting point, it's our foundation, and it's worthy of like getting extra attention. And that's hard as business owners, but we're doing our best and figuring it out.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So it's been 2 years, the new firm, which is incredible. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
I remember when you started.
Thank you.
And each of you have tons of experience. I mean, AG's office, multiple big law firms, a lot of different places where you got a ton of experience. How did you decide what to take from those law firms that you liked and what you said, you know what, we're going to do it way different in our law firm.
At least with like the day-to-day practical management of litigation matters, obviously our skills that we've gained in our law firm experience and public service experience, we take that with us day to day. But one thing that Meg and I kind of a central kind of tenet with the work that we do is that how you feel about a conflict really does matter. Like, of course, the law, how courts interpret the law, how the judicial process might examine a claim is important. And then data points about how other clients have done this is also really valuable in what we present to our client. But our clients' intuition, their experience, lived experience with the people involved, and also how they feel about the options, the strategy decisions that we're making, really, it does impact how they address the final resolution and how they move on, right? Whether they take that with them and they're able to improve how they manage people or improve how they like address conflict at work or improve how they advocate in a medical setting, like how they feel about it does matter. And I think that like it's not given enough space in our traditional avenues in our prior work experience. We just didn't feel like emotion and how the client felt was looped in to the same extent. And we think that impacts our client, how our clients feel at the end, because I think that they really do recognize once they see, like, it's not just about me handing my case to a lawyer. It's about me being in a team with this person and problem solving with information that only I know, right? The lawyer knows a lot in terms of like experience in this avenue, in this space, but like I know a lot about the people involved, and employment law is like people focused, right? Like we're humans. People make mistakes and there's so much emotion involved in that. So I think that that's an important part of how we're doing things differently.
Yeah, for sure. I think another piece, one of my first jobs was working on Capitol Hill for a congressman, and we had to do a lot of, explaining complicated legislation to constituents. So you had to kind of break it down and step by step, and this is what could happen, and this is, the goal, et cetera. This is what the next steps are. And I think, as Jen was saying, a lot of that can get lost when you're the attorney and somebody's turning to you for your expertise. You have done this 100 times, 1,000,000 times, but the person coming to you might have never done this before. Mm-hmm. And that can be really scary for people. And especially a lot of the people that we work with are highly skilled, very qualified, very capable, and they want to understand what is happening, what our thought process is, where our suggestions are coming from, mm-hmm. and kind of get the layout, the lay of the land. And so I think that's another big piece where instead of just saying, okay, this is what we're going to do, here's what I suggest, and going forth, we take some time to kind of, here's some approaches that you could take. There's a few different ways we could go about this, and let me explain, what that looks like, why I would suggest this one, why I wouldn't suggest this one over here, that type of thing. And I think people really appreciate that because they are now part of what the plan is, what the strategy is, and we get a lot of new information by approaching it that way that can really influence, what happens next. So
I love hearing that. It's similar to kind of how we approach things as well, too.
Yes.
And one of the things, the more seasoned you get in your career, I think it's so hard to always remember that your client doesn't know the business the way you do.
Yeah.
So being able to slow it down and educate them and talk them through their options, I think is really huge. That's what it sounds like you guys do. And we try to do the same thing, right? We've sold hundreds of houses every year. Mm-hmm. Most people only buy and sell a couple of times in their lifetime, right? And we have to always remember to kind of continue to lay out the options, be super clear in the conversation of like what is about to happen, right? Because it is emotional in either one of our industries, right? So it sounds like you're also leading your firm with empathy and actually having that human aspect, which I love hearing because nowadays everybody's trying to just increase their revenue streams by making sure that they're pumping out more and more, you know, transactions or more clients or whatever it might be. And it seems like you guys are still taking that approach that is so much more hands-on, so much more human, and so much more strategic for each person in each case. That being said, with small businesses, what are some of the mistakes that you see when it comes to hiring and handling employees? Because I'm sure that there's something that kind of might align in that sense.
You deal with every day.
Yeah.
Hiring and firing. It's
Yep.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to just more overwhelm or fear about, the legal side of things. And so people tend to just kind of hope that it isn't an issue and it doesn't come up. And what we always say for our small business owners is, you're out here providing a service or a product, or so you have this skill that the world needs. You should be focused on exactly that, the business that you're trying to create or put out into the world. And we're here to help you, create that foundation so that you don't end up down the road with issues that you hadn't anticipated from the legal side of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that a lot of small business owners are excited to grow their team, but they're worried to take that step because they know that other laws will kick in, and they've Googled, they've asked other, colleagues in their industry or other business owners they trust, but they want to have a bigger, a comfort with, what am I required to do? What makes sense for me practically? What am I deciding to do today? What can I plan to do later? And so we do a lot of just working sessions with business owners to help them walk through exactly what they're required to do based on their company size, and then help them choose what makes sense to prioritize right now. What do I want to invest in? What do I instinctually don't think I need just based on my team, right? And so people leave feeling wow, I was so worried about that. I was losing sleep over what if I'm not paying them at the right time? What if I shouldn't have written that policy that way? And so giving people comfort has been a great side perk of working with business owners. One thing that I wanted to mention in that realm is a lot of small businesses have close teams. People feel this is my family. I spend a lot of time with these people. They're never going to raise an employment claim.
And I'm going to treat them right.
Yes, and I'm always going to treat them right. I appreciate their work, and this isn't going to ever go down that route. And then something shifts in their personal life, in their family life, or professionally, right? Some changes, you have to make some changes as the owner of the business, and then you're kicking yourself that you didn't set those boundaries early. So I think thinking about it at a hiring or annual review period, just to make sure that the terms of the arrangement are clear, that everybody has a sense of what the expectations are. And I know you all have had other episodes around just employee management and performance and coaching and all of that. And you've shared some really valuable information in that realm. And I think it overlaps a lot with the employment compliance and just education about making sure that you have the data, and then you can make the decision that makes sense for you.
Your services go hand in hand with almost every single person we've had on the podcast, right? Because what we talk a lot about is scaling too. Mm-hmm. And what you just outlined and mentioned is that, you start off as this little family, right? Mm-hmm. When you build your beginning of your company, and you've got these core people. But as you do start to grow, as life starts to change, milestones happen, right? There's people that end up having health issues, that have babies, that have all kinds of different life experiences that are going to cause them to need certain benefits, right? Mm-hmm. But then from there, it's also, if your company is scaling and growing and you didn't already lay that foundation out there, are you even prepared legally for what you're going to, continue to grow into? Right. So one thing I'm curious about is, if someone were to enlist you guys and hire you, do you help write handbooks? Do you look through the handbooks? What does that look like when someone brings on Scully and O'Leary and has them help shape their business basically for growth and scalability?
Yeah, so it's very specific to the goals of the client. We can definitely, draft handbooks. We can review existing handbooks. We do that a lot for people. Review offer letters and job descriptions and all things like that. We do a lot of kind of discussion about, your policy might say this, but what are you actually doing day to day? What's your practice? So that we can, it's all aligned. And a piece that we always talk about for business owners, when you do start with that small group and, everybody's, pulling their weight and doing, what's expected. And as you grow, you might hire another person to your team, and maybe that person isn't so aligned with how things are going. And when you don't have policies and procedures in place, you're leaving yourself vulnerable and your team of solid employees that you want to keep and protect to this kind of, bad apple, or however you want to.
Mm-hmm. And then addressing it feels less personal to that one person, right? Because you thought about it ahead of time. So in terms of employment agreements, or like Mike said, offer letters, confidentiality agreements, non-solicit agreements, terms that govern the party's behavior at the start, during, and after are an area that we really love working with clients on. And then one area that has come up a lot recently is like the client knows they want to hire, but they're trying to figure out like, what is this role? Like, I know functionally what I want the role to be, but like, what makes sense legally? How many hours should I offer? What should my pay be? What should my benefits be? Like, help me think through like how to create this role, for how long. And so we're doing a lot of just like pre-hiring, kind of helping people like make those management decisions. And that's really fun because there's so much excitement around that for people, and we love playing a role in that.
That's awesome. You mentioned a few things. You mentioned vulnerability and a company being vulnerable by not having their processes essentially, ironclad. And then you mentioned something earlier about Google. People just Googling things, which leads me to think of AI.
I can see your face.
Oh, the buzzword.
Which is one of those things where, obviously everyone's talking about it every day in business, but I'm hearing cases, and I know we've talked offline about, how companies are now being are vulnerable by thinking they're getting the correct information from AI, or the recent decision in the courts where, now anything that is searched via AI can now be admissible, and it's not private or client privilege relation, right?
Yep.
Something along those
Yep.
lines I
Yep.
remember reading.
Yep.
Or you telling me about. So tell me a little bit about how AI has changed your business and what you're seeing on how you're having to kind of play along with that.
Sure. I mean, it's definitely a really valuable tool for our business. I mean, we're day to day trying to track what court decisions are on certain statutory rules, right? There's the statute that says what you have to do, but then the courts interpret that statute. And so judges are making law all the time. And so to keep track of that, you're reading cases and you're researching pretty often within legal tools. Now they have AI incorporated. And so you really only have to ask a couple of sentences and they will summarize the recent case law. And that saves us so much time. We, of course, have to then, before presenting anything to a client or a court, double check that the AI tool is doing that accurately, but it gives you such a valuable starting point on the research side. I think that is like a huge piece of things. Another side is like contract creation, like drafting contracts and working within tools to like be a step ahead when you're a lawyer, then reviewing it with your judgment and your expertise, right? And then I think that people get tripped up when they think that these tools replace the judgment of a lawyer, because we've been doing this for 13 years. We swore an oath, and there's candor that we are expected to administer in what we're saying to the court and what we're saying to our clients. A software robot tool does not have that. That doesn't have the judgment. It doesn't have the obligation to respect the kind of ethics behind the advice that you're giving. And so the case you're referencing, Ryan, is a recent federal court decision in New York. So there hasn't been any case law on this in our circuit in Massachusetts, but it's informing kind of this evolving area of the law where the judges will be interpreting like what is protected by attorney-client privilege. That decision said, if an individual is searching within a tool, this is Claude, I believe, searching within a tool and is asking for advice, legal advice, not at the direction of counsel. So he was just like, if this is exposure for me, kind of what should I do? That is not protected by privilege. Even though he thought that this was legal advice, it wasn't. And so the judge is saying, no, the other side can look at that search criteria and they can ask Claude for the information, and it doesn't remain within the sphere of the attorney-client privilege protection. And so there's going to continue to be case law around this in this area. Megan, I think it's really informing us and how we're presenting our engagements to our clients. We changed our engagement letter to make clear that any use of AI tools should be within at our direction. If you choose to do that on your own, there's a risk that could hurt your claims or hurt your case, right? Or expose you to potential additional damages or evidentiary exposure if you were to have a claim brought against you. And then also we are very upfront with our clients in ways in which we can utilize AI to kind of streamline some of our research time. But also, that's not legal advice, and the legal advice comes from us. I don't know if you have anything else, Meg.
I have a lot.
Great.
I'll keep it tight. But I think another piece is, sometimes people will come to us with pre-written contracts or pre-written emails. I plugged this into AI and then this is what came back. Can you edit it for me? And like Jen is saying, there's room for that. But sometimes, depending on the situation, it can take more time for us to edit something that AI has sent to you than for us to just draft it ourselves, because even just stylistically, and it's difficult to come from a perspective with a robot feeding you information, and you're trying to make it connect to this particular situation and use your expertise and all the information that you have from seeing other types of cases in the same way, to kind of massage that language and things like that. So again, there's definitely a place for it, and sometimes it can jump you a few steps ahead, but
that's a really good point. Yeah, sometimes it does set us back if we start working with it. Yeah, fair.
I feel like we could talk about this for hours, right? Yeah. Because I think in every industry, it's replacing some of the data entry, some of the small tasky type things. There's definitely an element of helping us with research, but there is also this other piece of you really still have to use like the human brain for high level strategy. And I think in most industries, that's where you really truly like can't be replaced. They've been saying for years real estate agents are going to be replaced. Like I don't think real estate agents, doctors, attorneys, like majority of actual industries out there cannot be replaced, because you really still have to actually assess all of the scenarios and then create a strategy to then, go forward.
Especially in the way that you guys, provide real estate services. A robot can't do that. You guys are exceptional.
Thank you.
Who's better?
You are, right?
You are.
They also said that financial advisors were going to be extinct back in the 90s when
like the dinosaurs.
like the T-Rex.
Yeah. Prehistoric.
And next thing you know.
Look at them go.
But they did. When E-Trade started, they said, people can trade their own stocks now. People aren't going to need financial advisors. And if you look at the numbers now, there's a higher percentage of people that actually use financial advisors.
Yep.
Same thing for real estate people. People want a human when making some of the biggest decisions of their lives. And you are helping people make some of their biggest decisions in the workplace as far as hiring and firing, et cetera. So
I think you guys said it best, though. It's a great starting point. It's a great tool to use for, kind of streamlining some things, making some things move faster. But ultimately, it really should not be relied on for the actual meat of what you're doing in your industry, right? Because that is where you have to truly use your brain, and use your expertise, your 13 years of experience. And I think that that's a really good point. I love hearing that. I also like hearing like the legal piece of it being potentially admissible in court and like things like that, because I think that actually puts in perspective that it's a tool to be used in certain scenarios, and then there are other areas where it's like you probably should just hire a human being and make sure you're using an advocate, right? Which is kind of why you started your business in general, is to have that advocacy for these different legal matters.
Exactly.
So switching gears. Sure. What is a common misconception for the mass wage and
wage and hour law?
Wage and hour, yes.
I
feel like a lot of people have some like unique thoughts on that, right? Like people will try and say to different companies or whatever, like, well, legally I'm supposed to get paid for this or paid for that, right? And then I think employers on the flip side don't really think through how they have to change up the wage and hour laws at certain times.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic to mention here, because we're educating people about it every week, both employees and employers. And I worked at the AG's office early in my career and focused on this law, and that it's very employee friendly in Massachusetts. So if you aren't paid your wages on time, or you're fired and not paid your last check on that day, the employee is entitled to 3 times the amount of the wage plus attorney's fees plus costs. So that attorney's fees lever really triggers things for people, right? And so I think that both employers and employees need to be very, very conscious of the employee's entitlement to timely payment, and then the risk of not doing that. Some employers just don't realize that, like, no, I have to direct deposit that check on the day of the termination, or if they resign, within the next regular scheduled payroll cycle, and it should include paid time off. Paid time off is deemed wages in Massachusetts. Sick time law is not. So if you have an extra sick time bank, that's not deemed wages. But that final check, if you're firing someone, needs to be their wages through their last day, as if they worked a full day, and then their paid time off. We can't say it enough. I feel like we're working with clients all the time that are facing legal claims because they didn't comply with this rule. And I think individuals should also be aware of it. If you have a confusion around what your last day is or what your last check is, or like what the terms were of your employment and your pay, check out the Wage Act. There's a lot of resources on the state's website, and we offer, consultations for people frequently to help them understand like what it is, what am I entitled to, what makes sense for me practically, what's the way to follow up about this and try to, solve the problem aside from just filing a complaint. And so we feel like that practical step, like how is this going to impact things for me, especially if you're still working somewhere and you're not getting paid timely, like there's a balance there.
Yeah. And there's one of the most interesting pieces of it, I think, is that it's strict liability, which means it doesn't matter if, as an employer, there was an administrative error, you did it by accident, you had the best intentions, you didn't mean for them to, not get their paycheck on the right day or whatever, you didn't pay them on the day that they were terminated. Your intent makes no difference. If you violate, it's just considered a violation, whether you had terrible intent or the best intent. And so there's not a whole lot that you can do there. And 3 times the wages, if another kind of piece of this is how you classify your workers. So, independent contractors versus employees, and there's very strict laws and rules about how, if you are calling someone an independent contractor, what criteria they have to meet in order to be considered that instead of an employee. And we see this every once in a while where employers will just say, well, I don't want to deal with the employee stuff, so I'll just call you an independent contractor. And then, that person works for years for their employer. And then, something goes south and they realize, oh, wait a minute, I was an employee that whole time and I didn't get paid overtime or, something like that. Times 3 of years of overtime payments, maybe you have multiple employees that you have, classified all as independent like this can add up very quickly, and, it can take a business out. Right. So, and it's avoidable, right? It's one of those things where you just need to know what you need to know. Yep. And you can approach in that way instead of, just kind of hoping for the best.
Right. So when you say it's avoidable, what would be your recommendation for, it's more for employers, right? Business owners. They need to be really well versed on this. So you mentioned free resources, but would they be able to hire you guys to walk you through, to walk them through these legal matters, make sure that all the people are set up correctly, and you kind of walk them through the payroll,
definitely
pros and
Courtney.
cons or laws, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we help business owners, I think, weekly, bi-weekly on this decision. Some that have started with a 1099 relationship, independent contractor relationship, they're growing. They're trying to discern who should transition to W-2, when, how are they categorizing which roles are remaining 1099. We help with that strategy decision often, and then documenting it in a way that sets them up to create boundaries around that for the people that they're working with, and also know what red flags to keep an eye out for as things change, right? Business owners are so busy. And so what creates the red flag for them? We're trying to give them kind of things to look out for, to know when to loop us back in. And then accurate record keeping, the pay stub needs to show the accurate paid time off. If this person is taking a ton of paid time off and you're not docking it within the system, and they have a chunk of money when you fire them, they're entitled to that. So the accuracy of the timekeeping is also a way that they can just kind of stay ahead of it. And so we help business owners kind of assess where they're at, what needs to change, and train their management level employees so that they're kind of aware of the exposure as they're managing the day-to-day ops. So that's an area that we love helping business owners with.
And how to draft your policies and procedures. Yes. So at least I'm going to give PTO, and it's a separate bucket from sick leave, and if I decide to terminate someone, I'll have to pay out that time. If you don't know that ahead of time, you could end up with a significant payout that you weren't expecting.
And their fees and your fees and the attorney's fees really just add things up to the mix. And so we're trying to help employers avoid that.
Don't be short-sighted, right? If you're hiring or firing, hire Scully and O'Leary.
That's right.
You can put that on a billboard right there.
Right? Maybe that's our new tagline. Don't be short-sighted.
It's so true, though. I mean, honestly, if you're hiring or firing someone, letting someone go, whatever the case may be.
Yes.
Talking to someone in getting a couple hours of legal advice could end up saving you tens and tens of thousands of dollars down the road.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even take into account the headache and everything you need to go through.
Peace of mind, too.
Really
As a
is.
business owner, I think you have so many sleepless nights with all of the other things you're worried about. Just even keeping the lights on, making sure that you're actually profitable, continuing to grow. And, then you've got all these employees. Now you know that you're responsible for their livelihood and their families and all those things. So I think that, like you said, it's taking a couple of hours to get legal advice and set your behind the scenes up, so it's actually legally sound, is going to be one of those things that it's just one weight that's lifted off your shoulders as an entrepreneur or business owner.
If you're going to run a legitimate business, might as well get your stuff set up properly.
Yeah, and build relationships with someone you trust. So if you're in a crisis, you know who you want to call to help you at that moment, right?
Great point.
It's like a plumber, right? You want to have a plumber on standby. So when you have an issue, you know who you trust, who you're going to call. It's similar with our service. We want to help people up front, but also create relationships so they feel like if this goes south, I know who I want to bring in to help on our team.
It's a great point, and I think any small business is built on relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It really is, and that's what you've built your whole business on, is the advocacy for these people, and you get in a relationship with these people, and then therefore you can help them even more.
Yeah.
But their specific case. One case that is kind of in the news lately is the Wayfair retaliation case,
Yes.
which I wanted to ask you about. They should have hired you before. That small company. Tell us about that case, because that could influence a lot of people, especially, in the business world.
Yes, that caught a lot of headlines a couple of weeks ago. So for those who haven't heard about it, it's a matter in state court jury verdict where a plaintiff was awarded $4.7 million, $600,000 in emotional distress damages, about $75,000 in back pay, and then $4 million in punitive damages for retaliatory treatment for claiming that she was treated differently based on her age and taking leave under the Massachusetts Paid Family Medical Leave Law. And so it was kind of a important court decision, jury verdict under the Mass Paid Family Medical Leave Law, because that law passed in 2018. There hasn't been a verdict around the retaliation component of that law, and it's something that we're advising our employer clients and our individual clients that we do benefits consulting with to say, this law is really, it's a heightened standard if you are to fire someone within 6 months of them taking leave. And so it's presumed retaliation if you do that. If you change, you make a change to their work role. It's called an adverse employment action. It might not be firing them, but making an adverse change to their role within 6 months of them, asserting their rights under that law. And so the standard is clear and convincing evidence. It's a lot higher. It's a lot harder for the employer to show that I would have done this regardless of whether they went on leave. It's much higher than the anti-discrimination law in Massachusetts, the standard for the plaintiff to prove a claim under 151B. And so this case kind of caught a lot of attention, and we're trying to remind employers that if you are going to make changes in your workplace and someone has taken leave under this law, recognize the risk here and maybe consider doing it outside the 6-month window. So long as you're not retaliating against the individual, right? So obviously you don't want to be retaliating against someone for asserting their rights under the law, but if you are going to fire them for a different reason, you're still going to have some exposure there if it's within the 6-month period. And so really pay close attention to documentation, conversations around the reason, and getting legal advice if you're making that decision. And I think we're going to continue to see more litigation around this area of the law.
It's really interesting. Yeah. Thanks for explaining that.
Of course.
I mean, one thing it's impressive what you guys do is you also advocate and educate people on what their rights are for these things that the employer is offering, whether it be through the company or through an individual. And I know, and we're going to put your website online where you have free resources, and if they want to reach out, they certainly can to have a conversation with you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Of course.
That's one area that Meg and I feel like is different about our law firm is we do a lot of benefits education, help people access the benefits that they paid into or their employer paid into, or maybe it's the state leave program. There's a lot of puzzle pieces involved in what makes sense for your employment leave, and so we love doing this consulting work. And we have a guide on our website to help people who are expecting parents kind of have a starting point.
That's great, because most people don't. They don't understand what they're entitled to.
Yep.
And you being able to navigate them to actually get them what they're legally entitled to is great.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in need, whether it be maternity leave, paternity leave, anything.
Right.
So that's awesome. Before we finish up, we want to do a quick lightning round.
Yes.
So
This is our first time doing
buckle
it.
up.
Oh, woo!
Yeah.
Okay.
So you guys are our guinea pigs.
Yeah.
But we're excited. I think I mean, to like pick your brain and get a little lightning answer on the questions that we have. I think we can learn a lot from you in just a couple minutes.
Love
That's
it.
great.
Okay.
All right.
So,
Give us one of your productivity hacks as a new business owner.
I know I got to do this quickly. You want to trust your intuition about what you're going to get done quickly that day and not always go by your list. I feel like sometimes I get distracted with the grind as opposed to like, what do I feel like I can accomplish and get done right now? And that doesn't always have to be the quickest thing, but trust your body and what feels like you can churn through something quicker than what you had planned. Obviously, you're balancing client commitments and all that, but I think that with the ops side and a lot of decisions that business owners have every day, it's easy to get kind of frustrated if you're not getting through what you told yourself you're supposed to do that day. And I think that I'm much more productive when I listen to what feels attainable and what feels like something I can do in the moment. And by the end of the week, I've accomplished the same things. It just comes with less grind. And I think for burnout and just for like creative problem solving, I think that the results that I get from listening to my body actually outweigh some of the day-to-day approaches that I used to use in my litigation world prior to starting our
Love
firm.
that. Dorothy, you got?
Yep.
I love that too. Yeah. Like just go with what you're kind of more in the mood for, right? Yeah. I think it's helpful. You gotta try and go with that because it will be faster. You'll get it done faster.
And it's more fun, really.
Yeah, it's supposed to be fun, like it is.
Exactly. And you're a business owner, right? It's super fun.
Fun only.
Yep. That's all it is. Okay. Favorite business book.
So we are always listening to Audible books to try to learn
In real estate for real life podcast.
Yeah, of
obviously.
course. This podcast on repeat. This might be a non-traditional one, but The Path to Integrity by Martha Beck. It's all about like finding your soul's purpose and exercises in like questioning kind of where you think you're supposed to go versus where you're being led, and whatever way that speaks to you. That has affirmed a lot of things for me and big picture strategic decisions that we make. And so while not a traditional business book, I think that when your business is so purposeful and the core of who you are, like that book helps with a lot of insight for me. And then a more traditional one that we've been relying on recently and trying to think through like revamping some marketing things and just like getting our message out is Story Brand 2.0, kind of focusing on like understanding your brand and simplifying it for your ideal client. That's been really helpful.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to put them both on my list.
All right, another one. Biggest legal myth.
I think the biggest legal myth is that everything has to be contentious. You would only turn to an attorney when there's some big fight that you're going to get into and things are already, really kind of have already devolved. What we do a lot of is, again, the advocacy piece, educating people so that they can kind of have more information to make a decision about what they want to do next, right? Like they don't often come to us because everything is perfect, but it doesn't need to be something that, we've hit a hard wall and that's, there's nowhere else to go. So let's sue them, There's so much space in between there. And even just in terms of having the information that you need, again, to be able to make a decision about what you want to do next as an employee, as an employer, even, in random things like trying to open a brick and mortar and you're sorting through like your lease and you're like, I don't know what this says, do I hire a whole law firm to review this? And that is like fully within what we offer to our, small business clients. It's like, it just kind of educating people about. There's so much out there.
Doesn't need to be a
we
fight.
can break it down and make it, exactly. Like this is what this says. What do you think?
Cool. Yeah.
And if you don't like it, then let's talk about what we can do about it. It doesn't have to be this, like banging fists on the table thing.
Well, I love that. You're asking people to just kind of slow down, take a pause, learn your options, and then from there make a more clear-headed, level-headed decision, right?
Yep.
So that's a really good point. I do think a lot of people love to just use the word sue, right?
And we can do that too.
Yes. Hey. Okay, you guys, you cover it all.
Last one. Tip for any entrepreneur that is opening their own business. What's your one tip?
I would say, Jen touched on this, you want to gather information, you want to plan, but you also want to look inside of yourself for answers, I think there's so much that for myself in particular, I do a lot of research. I'm looking for, somebody to explain to me what I should do, and trying to make decisions from, the experts and everybody that's in this outside space. And that's important. It's important to get the information that you need to have, an understanding of what's the options are, et cetera. But the best way that I found to know what to do next was to have that information and then sit quietly with myself and say, does this feel right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Or not? And I think that is something that we do all the time, and it's proven over and over, in very specific, clear ways that we were I think we should say no to this. I can't really articulate why.
Mm-hmm.
And then months later, we find out why, and we couldn't have known that at the time.
It happens a lot. Yeah.
So I think that, it's important to look to experts and for guidance and things like that, especially for things that you don't know anything about. But at the end of the day, if you're starting your own business and you're going to go out on your own, you're going to take that risk, listening to yourself is just as important.
I think that's a really good point in terms of you gather a lot of information, but ultimately the information we gather sometimes is conflicting.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to actually kind of figure out where you fall within all of the different bits of information that you are getting. So I think just taking that moment to reflect instead of impulsively continuing to move, and then figuring out where you want to fall within it.
And you might
is a great
impulsively continue to move, or you might get stuck in the indecision of too much information.
Yeah.
And that can also be a problem, because then you don't take the leap, and you were otherwise very capable, and you probably knew the whole time what to do, but you just got stuck in it.
Yeah.
Well, this is great, guys. I can't tell you how much we appreciate you coming on.
We love chatting with you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having
We
us.
could do this for hours. This is great.
Are we already done?
No.
I mean, honestly, I think that this left me feeling like we need to definitely talk more as we continue to scale our business. I think we have a lot of listeners and a lot of other people that have been on the podcast that have been in positions where they absolutely could use your expertise. The other thing that you guys provide, which is a massive topic that we've had with almost every other entrepreneur on our podcast as well, is clarity. They always say, if you want to be a good leader, you have to have clarity. If you want to have a great work environment, a non-toxic work environment, there has to be clarity. You have to be able to really express and be clear on what it is that your expectation is from your employees and what the expectation is that you're going to provide your employees. And you guys actually are the missing link that would provide even more clarity for all of those businesses. So I kind of love that we've been able to full circle, kind of bring your business and your expertise into this world, because I think that is truly one of the topics and themes of entrepreneurship. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.
True. Well, thank you for coming on. Jen and Meg of Scully and O'Leary, we can't thank you enough. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.